I asked you guys to give your predictions for Kentucky basketball this upcoming season, and these were your answers.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what's going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on into Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe, and on today's episode of Locked On Kentucky, we are going through your official predictions for Kentucky basketball's season that's about to start here in just a couple of weeks. I'm so excited to get into this with you guys. Hundreds of you went to the Google form to submit your predictions for wins and losses for every single game. You had stat predictions, you had players that are going to lead in different categories, and then at the very end, we're going to dive into what you guys think about the NCAA tournament, the SEC tournament, and how far the Wildcats could go. Thank you so much for making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. Want to remind everyone out there that we are free and available on all platforms, and if you are watching on YouTube, I would greatly appreciate it if you subscribe to the show. If you're listening on podcast, I would love it if you subscribed there as well. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, let's go ahead and get into it. Like I mentioned, there was a Google form. I'm going to continue to link it in the description until the season starts. This will be open for all of you to go submit your wins and losses. Maybe it'll change the outcome of some of these games that we're going to go over here today. But I made a Google form and I asked you guys to go and predict every single game for Kentucky basketball in the regular season. I asked you, how far do you think Kentucky's going to go in the SEC tournament? How far are they going to go in the NCAA tournament? And then I asked you specifically for statistics, who's going to lead in rebounds, points, and assists per game? And you had some really interesting responses there. So we'll start here in the non-conference slate to open it up. Again, hundreds of you submitted. I think it was like 309 people took this form here. 309 responses. Kentucky versus Wright State on the season opener. 100% of you said Kentucky is going to win that game. That does not surprise me. You will not see a ton of deviation here when going through some of the projected to be easier non-conference games. 309 people all said, yes, Kentucky is going to win that game. Then you get into Kentucky versus Bucknell. And this is really interesting. 99.5% of you said that Kentucky would beat Bucknell. 1% of you think that Kentucky, or 0.5% of you think that Kentucky is going to lose to Bucknell. And I'm going to be honest with you, I don't really see, it would be very shocking if the Wildcats ended up losing this one. You go and look at where Bucknell was a season ago on KenPom. They were ranked 276. They had a 14-19 record. I don't think they're going to be much better here this season. They didn't push pace. They didn't have any sort of offensive efficiency. They weren't particularly tall either. This was a team that was underneath average in what was a subpar conference last year in the Patriot League. So I don't necessarily see where the concern here comes for that one person, but you know what? Upsets happen on occasion. We all remember Evansville. We remember UNC Wilmington from last year as well. Okay. The big game to start off the season, Kentucky versus Duke. This is one that I actually was kind of surprised by. I would have thought more of you would have picked Duke to win. Now, Duke is the favorite here, according to you guys, but by a very small margin. 51.2% of you believe that Duke will beat Kentucky in the State Farm Champions Classic on November 12th. 48.8% of you believe that Kentucky will lose. So we've started the season off here 2-1 with a notable loss to Duke. Now, we will try and keep track of some of these major wins and losses for the Wildcats as we go through this, and we'll try and pick up the pace here a little bit. Kentucky versus Lipscomb. Every one of you said that Kentucky would beat Lipscomb, so now we are 3-1. All of you said that Kentucky would beat Jackson State on November 22nd, so now 4-1. And then a game with a little bit of deviation. 3 of you out of 309 said that Kentucky would lose to Western Kentucky. 98.6% of you said that Kentucky would win that game, so 5-1. Then you go on to Georgia State. 2 of you said that Kentucky would lose that game, while 99% of you said that Kentucky would win. So on November 29th, we've got a dub from you guys there. Then another very interesting non-conference game on the road in Clemson, South Carolina for the SEC ACC Challenge. This one is a game that you guys had a little bit of disagreement on. 23.4% of you believe that Clemson's going to win the game, while 76.6% of you believe that the Wildcats will end up winning. So we'll give Kentucky the victory there. Kentucky versus the Gonzaga Bulldogs on December 7th for the battle for Seattle and Washington. 63.2% of you believe that Kentucky will lose that game to the Bulldogs. Does not shock me. 36.8% of you believe that Kentucky will lose to the Zags. So we'll put Clemson in the major win category, and we will put the Zags in the major lose category. All right. So right now we are 6-2, if I'm not mistaken. We'll just go back up here to check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7-2. I miscalculated the tally marks that I've been putting down here, even though I have them correct. All right, Kentucky versus Colgate. Toothpaste. Never want to lose to toothpaste. Kentucky, 99.5% of you believe that Kentucky will end up winning that game, so we will improve to 8-1. Kentucky versus Louisville. It's interesting. 4.8% of you said that Louisville would win this game. If you were among the I think 10 or 20 people that submitted and said that you believe Louisville will win this game, and you're watching this show, put it in the comments below or at Locked On UK. Explain why you think Kentucky will lose this game to Louisville. So that is 9-1 now. The CBS Sports Classic for Kentucky, 19.6% of you think that Ohio State will win the game. 80.4% of you think that Kentucky will win. So 10-2. We'll put OSU and Louisville in the big wins category as we continue along here. Kentucky versus Brown. All of you think that Kentucky will win that game. So 11-2 coming out of the non-conference slate. I'm just going to go back through real quick just to make sure. So we have a win for Wright State. We have a win for Bucknell. We have a loss for Duke. We have a win for Lipscomb. We have a win for Jackson State. We have a win for Western Kentucky. We have a win for Georgia State. We have a loss, we have a win for Clemson. And then we have a loss for Gonzaga. We have a win for Colgate, a win for Louisville, a win for Ohio State, and a win for Brown. All right. We'll continue along here to talk about what you guys said about the Kentucky basketball upcoming season. By the way, I think that is a perfectly reasonable non-conference slate to lose to Gonzaga, Duke, beat Ohio State, Clemson, and Louisville. That's probably where I think if we polled the entirety of Big Blue Nation, that's probably where everybody would kind of land if we just did the votes and the percentages there. But we'll continue to break this down here in just a moment. Before we do that, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at FanDuel. NFL fans, you can continue the season here with a big return on FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, you can view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That is over at FanDuel.com. Again, get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's all over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, continuing along here on the Wednesday edition of Locked On Kentucky. Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. I really appreciate you guys checking out the show today. If you have not subscribed to the YouTube channel or the podcast feed, I would greatly appreciate it if you did so. If you have submitted in this Google form and you have a disagreement possibly with some of the answers so far, I would love for you to put them in the comments below, or at Locked On UK on Twitter is where you can also kind of submit your thoughts. Okay. We are getting into we are getting now into conference play. And this is where things get interesting because some of you start to disagree on kind of what Kentucky's wins and losses should be. And I tried to make this as clear as possible when Kentucky was going to be traveling on the road. And it seems like you guys flipped the script on the Bama and the Tennessee games, meaning you have Kentucky winning on the road and losing at home. Either way, we're taking those as a 1-1 split because I think that's how you guys would have voted if it had been explained a little bit more clearly to you. That's my fault, I think. So we've got the SEC opener against Florida at home, and you think Kentucky's going to win. 78.5% of you think Kentucky is going to win to improve to 12-2, 1-0 in SEC play. Then you've got Georgia on the road. Kentucky versus Georgia. 94.3% of you think that Kentucky is going to win that game. Just 5.7% of you think Kentucky's going to lose. Then you're on the road to Mississippi State. Think Kentucky's going to win that game as well. Kentucky, 84.7% favorites as opposed to Mississippi State's 15.3%. This is a game that I think could trip Kentucky up early, as well as possibly even the Georgia game as well. Every single SEC road trip is going to be brutal, I think, for the Cats. It's going to be very tough. So we'll see kind of how things turn out. But you guys right now have them getting that win and improving to 14-2. You have them improving to 15-2 when they beat Texas A&M at home January 14th, 67.5% to 32.5% there. Then you have Kentucky taking their first loss in quite some time to the Alabama Crimson Tide at home. You have us losing to Bama at home. 73.7% of you think that Bama is going to win this game. So Kentucky now 4-1 in the SEC, 15-3 overall. This is a game that right now I think a lot of people would pick Kentucky to lose, to be completely honest with you. If you're looking at the big wins and losses right now, I would say that Kentucky's got big wins over Clemson, Ohio State, Louisville, A&M, and Florida. And then you've got losses to Duke, Gonzaga, and Bama that are big-time losses. You're then on the road playing against Vanderbilt. 98.1% of you think that Kentucky's going to win that game. 16-3. You're looking at 5-1 in the SEC. You are then traveling to Tennessee, and you think Kentucky is going to win that game. 55.5% of you think that Kentucky is going to win that game on the road. I will note that Kentucky did, in fact, split this series 1-1, losing at home and winning on the road a season ago. So I don't necessarily think it would be the most shocking thing in the world if Kentucky did, in fact, end up winning this game and then turning around later on in the year and losing to the Vols in Rupp Arena. It could happen. It happened last year. So that's another big win here against Tennessee. You have now improved to 17-3. You are looking at 6-1 in conference play. 7-1 in conference play after you beat what is arguably the most important team on your schedule. February 1st, Arkansas comes to town. Coach Cal and his band of former Kentucky players coming down to face off against Mark Pope and the Cats. 89.5% of you think Kentucky's going to win this game. Just 10.5% of you think that the Arkansas Razorbacks are going to win. That is going to be one of the biggest games of the season to monitor. So you've got Kentucky closing it out in two of the biggest games of the year, on the road at Tennessee and then at home against Arkansas, and back-to-back contests. You then travel to Ole Miss. Another spot where I think you have potential upset concern, maybe. And 14.8% of you think that is the same here, but 85.2% of you think that Kentucky ends up winning this game. So now here you are, 19-3, 8-1 in SEC play. You are now going to get your 20th win of the season against South Carolina at home. You are now playing 20-3. You are looking at 9-1 in SEC play. You are playing on fire right now. And then you return home to Rupp Arena to face off against Kentucky. And this is, I stand corrected. This has changed since I have looked at this. It's now a split in Kentucky's favor, 53.1% in favor of the Wildcats. 46.9% of you think that Tennessee's going to win this game in Rupp Arena. So that is a series sweep for the Kentucky Wildcats here against Tennessee. So now you are 21-3. You're looking, if I'm not mistaken, at what is that? 10-1 in SEC play. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-1 in SEC play. Wow. That would be this would just be an incredible start to the season, and it keeps going. You think Kentucky's going to go on the road and beat Texas. 23% of you think that Kentucky's going to lose this game. This is one of the bigger road splits here for the opposing team. Obviously, there's some Kentucky bias baked into these predictions from you guys, and I don't blame you. I mean, it's part of it. You're fans. Obviously, I'm going to predict things for Kentucky, right, that may not seem the most logical. And I'm not saying this is illogical, by the way. I wouldn't pick Kentucky to lose this game either. I don't think Texas is going to be all that great. But this is another one. You categorize this with the two Mississippi schools. You put this in here with Georgia. You put this in here with Oklahoma later on down the line. This is another potential upset spot that you need to monitor. So Kentucky 11-1 here as they continue on with a big win against Texas, probably. And I say big win. It could end up being a quad one. We won't write it down, but it's probably going to end up being a quad one game. Kentucky versus Vanderbilt, you think Kentucky's going to win that game. 98.6% of you think that's going to be the case there. And then you go on the road, and oh my goodness, this is also swung, I should say, since I've looked at it. Of course, about 100 of you have voted since I had last looked at it. Alabama versus Kentucky on the road in Tuscaloosa. 55.5% of you think that Kentucky's going to win that game. So, wow, winning on the road against Bama, but losing at home. I know I said earlier that the series had split, but I misspoke. Apparently, I just gotten this all jacked up. You had us losing the series to Bama. You had us splitting against Tennessee, and here we are now splitting against Bama and sweeping Tennessee, which is really interesting. On the road at Oklahoma, just 6.2% of you think that Kentucky's going to lose that game. So here we are now with yet another victory. So we are looking at 25-3 right now with 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 1 in SEC play. You have us beating Auburn, and this is one of the more close home competitions. 42.1% of you think that we're going to lose to Auburn, but nevertheless, Wildcats get the dub to improve to 15-1. Going to put that down in the big wins category. Kentucky versus LSU, only 8% of you think that Kentucky's going to lose this game. So here we go. Another one, 16-1. You've got us improving to 17-1 after beating Missouri to close out the season. 17-1 in SEC play. That is 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 26, 27, 28, and 3. 28 and 3. Going to go ahead and mark that down here, and we will save that piece of paper, and we will look at it at the end of the year. 28-3. 17-1 in SEC play. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't think we've seen dominance like that from the Cats in a very, very long time, but a lot of you seem to have high expectations, as does the head coach, frankly. If you want to go back and look at the last time Kentucky finished 17-1 or better in SEC play, you got to look at that 2015 season where Kentucky went to the Final Four, was 38-1, 18-0. They were 38-2, 16-0 in 2012. And yeah, those were really the big standouts. You have to go all the way back to 2003 to see 16-0 again with Tubby Smith. Outside of that, you don't see Kentucky finish with a loss or perfect all the way through Tubby Smith's tenure. He did it even the year he won the national title, 35-4. He was 14-2. So Wildcats here, I've got some high expectations. Let me know what you think in the comments below. We've got arguably the biggest thing here, though, is the statistical leaders, and then where you think Kentucky's going to finish in the postseason. Let's wrap this up. Your predictions here on Locked On Kentucky. Before we dive into it, I do want to tell you guys about our friends over at Game Time. Game Time has this new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets even easier for all of your favorite events. And it does not matter what kind of event. I know that I've talked a lot here about how I've used it for college football multiple times this year already, actually. I have used it for baseball. I've used it for the Braves. You could use it for NBA. You can use it for any kind of sporting event, but there's also concerts. There is also movies. There is also theater, comedy, music, all kinds of stuff. I actually got tickets to a Post Malone concert through Game Time. It's the place you need to go to get your tickets. Game Time Picks, though, their new feature. It filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time in searching through thousands of tickets. It is incredible. They've got views from your seat. They've got all-in prices, so there's no hidden fees. You need to take the guesswork out of buying tickets over at Game Time. By downloading the Game Time app, you can create an account. You can use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right, continuing along here on the Wednesday edition of Locked On Kentucky. Going to wrap this one up here with some more predictions from you guys. So we've gone through the regular season. You guys think that Kentucky basketball is going to go 28-3 with some big wins. A lot of big wins over Clemson, Ohio State, Louisville, A&M, Florida, Auburn, Tennessee twice, Arkansas, Alabama. You have the 3 losses of the season going to Duke, Gonzaga, and Alabama at home. Interesting. I knew that there was a little bit of Kentucky bias baked into this, but I did not think that it was that high. Actually, last time I went through the wins and losses for you guys, it was like 26 or 25 wins. So you guys have really turned things around as of late. But we're going to keep it pushing here. We've got you guys with the statistical categories. I put the mainstays, or the players that I expect to be the mainstays of the rotation, as like the top 6 or 7 choices in these 3 major statistical categories. And then I also had an other as well that you guys could vote on. And I think that there was some really interesting stuff going on in the assists. But outside of that, everything else actually, I think it's pretty straightforward. I'm going to pull this up on my phone so I can look at all of the specifics here because you can't quite see it on your computer. So here we go. We're going to start here with points per game. Who do you think will lead Kentucky in points per game? 66.5% of you said Jackson Robinson will lead the Wildcats in points per game. Second was Andrew Carr with just 10.5%, a major drop-off. So the majority of you here think Jackson Robinson, and then the rest of you seem to kind of be having a conversation about who else could possibly be here. Oh, excuse me. I have skipped over Kobe Brea, who is sitting at 13.3%. Otega Owe got 6 votes. Kobe Brea, if I'm not mistaken, had like 42 or 52. Amari Williams did not get a vote, even though he was on here. Kirk Carissa got 2.87%, and then 1.91% of you said other. My assumption is that would either be Colin Chandler, Trent Noah, or Travis Perry. Rebounds per game. Jackson Robinson, 3.83%. Otega Owe, 5.26%. You've got Kobe Brea with less than 1%. Actually, it's about 0.5%. Kirk Carissa at almost 1%. Other at 1.44%. And then you've got the 2 leaders here. Andrew Carr, 24.8% of you think that Andrew Carr will lead in rebounds per game. And then 63.2% of you think that Amari Williams will lead in rebounds per game. Excuse me, I think I messed that up there. And then assists per game. This is where it gets interesting. Because nearly the majority, this is the closest race so far, nearly the majority was almost split. It was like a 20-ish vote difference between Kirk Carissa and then other. And my assumption is Travis Perry was on a lot of your minds. Kirk Carissa had 40%. Other got 31%. Amari Williams got 6.2%. Brea got 5.7%. Owe got 3.8%. Carr got 4.3%. And Robinson got 9.1%. So it's either going to be Kirk Carissa or probably Travis Perry is what I'm guessing you guys thought. And then we get into the fun stuff. Where will Kentucky finish in the SEC? I asked you guys. 28.1% of you said, or 28.7% of you said second. 29% of you said third. 15.7% of you said first. 14.3% of you said fourth. 7.6% said fifth. 2.8% said 6th. Nobody said 7th. Only one person said 8th and 9th. No one said 10th. One person said 11th, and no one said lower than 11th in the SEC. The majority of you having Kentucky in that top 4 with the double bye, and the bracket, is a little different this year. There's just a lot more games on day 1 with the 11 through 16 seeds. Everybody gets in the tournament now. Everybody gets in the tournament, and like a quarter of them play on that first day is what I was trying to say. I'm all out of sorts here as we wrap the show up. How far will Kentucky make it in the SEC tournament? One of you said that Kentucky won't make the SEC tournament, which I came to realize after I put this together was not possible, so apologize to that hater. One person said Kentucky will be in the first round as an 11 through 16 seed. One person said they will go as far as 7 people said Kentucky would go as far as the second round. 11.9% of you said that Kentucky would make the quarterfinals. 35% of you said Kentucky would make the semis, and then an overwhelming majority, 48.8%, think that Kentucky's going to the SEC championship. Now, I did not have winning the SEC championship on this thing here, but I would assume that a lot of you would have that implied if you think Kentucky's going to make it. How far will Kentucky make it in the NCAA tournament? This is kind of where I thought things would fall. Less than 1% of you think that Kentucky's not going to make the tournament, period. 2 of you think that they won't. None of you, 0 of the 300 plus submissions, none of you think Kentucky's losing in the first round. None. That shocks me, especially considering how Kentucky has fared in the postseason as of late. 7.66% of you think that Kentucky is going to make it to the second round. 42.5% think Kentucky's going to make it to the Sweet 16. That's the majority. 30% think Kentucky makes it to the Elite 8. 11.5% think Kentucky makes the Final Four. And 7.2% think Kentucky's going to make the national championship. Again, I think that there's a little bias here baked into the poll, but I don't think that the statistical leaders nor the postseason projections are extremely out of line from you guys. I'm down with it. I'm down with it. Now 28-3, that's tough to get at. But, I mean, hey, the Wildcats have surprised people before, and Mark Pope, I think, is extremely underrated heading into this season. So that is the Google form as it stands today. We'll continue to monitor it. Again, link is in the description if you want to check it out. And that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. You can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On UK. You can follow me on Twitter at @LanceDawe_, and you can follow the show over on Instagram. That is at Kentucky Podcast. Any questions, comments, concerns, you can leave those in the YouTube comments below. You can hit me on socials at Locked On UK, at @LanceDawe_. I will see you all tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Kentucky. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and God bless.